Hi, we are so excited to be here today and share with you about the power of engagement. And I want to welcome everyone online and in the room. We're really excited to be here and have this conversation with you. So I want to tell you a little bit about where we started in our journey and how we have started to move throughout the community in the last 4.5 years since Major was born. When I was pregnant with Major, I had that, normal new mom worry. First pregnancy, I think everyone's a little nervous, and I just started to get this feeling that something wasn't right, that something might be going on with Major's health. And I had no reason at all to think that. Had screenings done, nothing diagnostic, but there was nothing that told us we needed to dig deeper. And so just chalked it up to new mom nerves and tried to move forward. Cystic fibrosis was actually something I worried about. I'd had a couple of touch points throughout my life, just very briefly, with CF in different books I read, with my job as well, and it was something I was concerned about. I knew what a serious disease it was, but I let it go. And I remember when Major was born that the doctor placed him into my arms, and I remember looking at him and thinking, he's fine. There was nothing to worry about. Within a few hours, we realized there was something going on. By no means did I think it was CF, but Major was really struggling to eat, spitting up a lot, and we quickly realized he had meconium ileus. So after 2 days in labor and delivery, we were rushed off to the NICU, and we were told that we needed to rule out the possibility of cystic fibrosis, which of course we were explained odds were pretty high it was CF. And I remember, I think those were our darkest 2 days, for sure. More than 2 days, actually. We had to wait in NICU for 5 days. Major was 2 days old when we heard he might have CF, and we got the sweat test when he was 7 days old. It was actually before the newborn screen even came back, since they knew he probably had it. And I just remember the doctor walking down the hall, and when he put his hand on the door to come into the room, we knew right away that the test was positive from his demeanor. And he was a neonatologist. He was not a CF specialist. And we were so fortunate that he knew a lot about cystic fibrosis, and he knew enough to tell us in the diagnosis conversation that there was hope. And he told us, through our tears, I was literally on the ground. And he said, the dreams that you have for Major, you should continue to dream them. And so within that first 20 minutes, we already had just a little shred of hope for him. And that really continued into the next day as we met our pulmonologist and center director for the first time. He spent 3 hours with us in our NICU room, and he shared with us all the great advancements in science and talked about what CF was and what it wasn't, and what Major could do, which was anything. And he told us that he wasn't going to leave the room until he was sure that we would raise Major the exact same way that we would raise Major if he did not have CF. So from that day on, that was the decision we made.
Yeah, that really set the tone, I think, for us right away. And it was actually our pulmonologist who introduced us to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. He really encouraged us to reach out, find time to connect with them. I think not only for education purposes to help us understand what the disease is and isn't more, but I think also for support. And so if anyone who knows us for longer than 10 minutes understands that we had a direction, so we were in the foundation's office within a week. And we had that conversation. We were introduced to the patient registry, and when that question was asked, it was no hesitation, absolutely, put us in there. We understood right away what that benefit was. But like I think pretty much everyone, the first thing we were exposed to was, great strides and fundraising. I think our first question was, what can we do? How can we help? And I think that was the way that probably almost everyone in this room got started, was that the first question they were asking. And, again, Great Strides was there, but I think the first event that we actually attended was the first one that was coming up was in the fall. We have our wine opener. And so as soon as tickets went on sale, VIP tickets, and we were in there, and we had, that first year we had an okay group there, but we had some friends and family that showed up, and they didn't just show up. They showed up and they bid, and they spent their money. And that really made us aware of how much of a support system we had, and that just made us want to do more. We got to meet other CF families that we hadn't met yet. But after that was over, that was really when we kind of dug into the Great Strides was the next event. And so that's, we were empowered to do our fundraising whatever way we wanted. Everyone in Iowa, does their team shirts. And I think we just did a lot of social media asks. And, that was another really eye-opening experience as far as how many people we had that loved and supported us, because we had people come from halfway across the country to come to our walk. We had the largest team in the state that first year. And that just opened our eyes to everything, and it just wanted us to do more. Next thing you know, we're on committees, we're on boards for the foundation, and it just led to the next thing.
Yeah, I think it was about when Major was a year and a half, and our executive director brought up the possibility of getting involved with advocacy. And we were really intrigued. We really had not had any exposure to advocacy through any other part of our life yet. And we learned about it and went to our first March on the Hill, and we were just obviously just locked in. We were hooked after that with advocacy. And I think what we really like about it initially and to this day is it gives us a space to put all of the emotions that come along with cystic fibrosis. It's a roller coaster, and there's really hard days. And there's days that are really average, and we're just, like any other family not dealing with a health condition. But working in advocacy, we have a place to put the good and the bad feelings.
Absolutely. And I remember March on the Hill, I think for both of us really was, first of all, it was a great opportunity to meet other people that have now become lifelong friends. Many of you in this room, I see you, and we love you all. But through all those interactions and those introductions, the thing that we got to do was talk to all of you and learn more about what they were doing. What were you doing to be engaged? What were you doing to fundraise? And we were introduced to so many other things that we had no idea even existed. And I think that was the point that we really said, hey, we've only been doing this for 2 years, at that point. And it was a big thing to us, but I think the thing that we really walked away from that first March on the Hill was that in order for us to be the advocates that we wanted to be, but also raise money the way that we wanted to fundraise and be effective, was that we really understood that we needed to educate ourselves further, way, way more than what we currently were.
And that took us to NACFC in 2016. That was the first year we went, and we were really excited to learn more about research and all the great things that were happening that we'd heard our clinicians talking about over the last few years. And at that conference, it was, I think, in Orlando that year, there was a lot of focus on the importance of participating in clinical trials, especially as we have these triples coming down the pipeline, better drugs, more drugs that are going to extend Major's life, and so many people that, like we've been talking about this morning. And at 2, we had not considered enrolling Major in a drug trial. We felt like he could hardly, he could say a few things, and what would that feel like, putting a 2-year-old into a clinical trial? And as we learned at NACFC through that year, how important it was that he did need to be there if he could be. And so we left NACFC, and in the airport, we were on the website in the clinical trial finder, and we found something Major was eligible for, and he did participate in a trial. And it was really important to us, we realized, after learning at NACFC and now going through that whole experience, because when Major was born, he was handed enzymes, and he was handed albuterol a few months later. He was handed Pulmozyme, and he was given all these things that we just got from the pharmacy. There were no questions asked, because people before us did clinical trials to make sure that could happen for Major. And now we're going to need to do clinical trials to make that happen for that child in 2030 that Mark talked about. And so it was a really good experience for us to go through it, and Major sort of came through a phase in there where when he first started the trial, he didn't know, and now he understands that he helped bring a drug to other people. Yeah, and something that we're all very proud of, to be a part of. And, I remember that NACFC really kind of marked the first full season with CF for us. All of the different events, meeting all the different people, felt like we were a little bit seasoned at that point. And it gave us the opportunity to learn even more and more. At every single event, new things were popping up. And I remember over that first couple of years of Major's life, we really found things to get involved in that struck us individually. And
opposites attract a little bit. And so we each have our own things that we're really into and we enjoy. And so we started to look at things that just personally lit a fire for us. I know for me, we got invited to be a part of the Volunteer Leadership Council on the committees, and I looked at what's now the Corporate Champions program, and I've really enjoyed trying to figure out how we can best engage these corporations and bring them, lift them up. And I can't wait to see all of the celebration of all the corporate champions we have later on here in the weekend. And then also having the opportunity to be a part of a webinar, a self-care webinar with two people that are now close, dear friends of mine, Julie Reedy and Summer. That introduced me to two people that I love dearly, and so I'm glad that they're both here with us. And then also, more recently, I've been able to get involved with CF Peer Connect. Once they expanded that program out to the families, I've had the opportunity to meet two men in the CF community that one is a young single father in Arizona, and he was having a hard time just with some of the day-to-day stuff, and he just needed to know that it wasn't just him. And he wasn't going through this alone. And so to be able to be that resource for him was great. And more recently, I've been able to connect with a grandfather who's also a caretaker. And I think that the reason I'm so passionate about this specific one is because mental health, we'll talk more about, and it's becoming more and more of an issue, especially as men in this world. The moms are the ones that really, let's be honest, they're the drivers here. I mean, and we feel like a lot of times as men that we have to be that rock or be that support, but we go through a lot as well. And so for me to be able to hopefully do for somebody what it is that our neonatologist did for us, which was introduce them to this entire thing in a positive light, I can't think of a better way to give back. And I know, Jackie, you found obviously different ways that I have that you've loved to get involved.
Yeah, one of the things I did really early on was join our parent advisory board, and I served on that for about 3 years, and just loved the experience of getting to see what goes into everything our clinics are doing and how we can make them better, how we can keep them strong. I got to sit through the process of helping our center maintain their accreditation, and that was really neat behind the scenes. I had no idea what went into it, and the parent input that went into it. I was blown away to be asked to be a part of that conversation. And I love, like Drew talked about, the virtual connections. I think they can get started at all of our virtual events, and then they parlay into social media. I am really active on Instagram, and I have found such a community there of moms and other people with cystic fibrosis that have become best friends. And we had a situation with Major a few months ago where he had to start doing nasal rinses. And it doesn't sound that hard. You spray some water up your nose. And so we just kept telling him that it's not going to hurt. It won't.
He wasn't buying that.
It won't hurt, but it's weird. And we just 40 minutes in our bathroom trying to get him to do it. And I thought, we're not getting anywhere. And so I called Chad Reedy the next morning, and I said, hey, we're stuck. And we're mom and dad, and we're the one always asking him to do all this stuff. And we've now asked him to do something else, and he doesn't want to do it. What do you think? How can I explain it differently? And he said, what about me? And so he sent me a video of him explaining to Major, I'm 37, I have CF2, and I have 2 boys your age. And to have another parent figure walk Major through that, he was so much more credible than us. And so without those virtual... He was!
Really?
He'd done it.
Mom, Dad, you don't do this. Knock it off,
Even Drew was trying. Drew was doing nasal rinses.
I was doing it
to
too.
Major. Nothing worked. And Chad was able to alleviate that fear for Major, and he sends Chad videos of himself doing these things, and every time if he gets a really good one, he'll be like, we got to tell Chad.
It's not.
As much as we have certainly enjoyed volunteering with the community, and we'll continue to do so, we like to give. But we have gotten more from everyone in this room and at home than we could ever hope to give you. This community is so powerful, and it's why we're here, it's why we're staying, it's why we're going to stay until we're done. You've become part of our lives. And I remember when Major was born, I had those feelings as you walk through the grief process that I just wanted to undo it. I wished it had never happened to Major, and that's not really true anymore. I will take it away, absolutely. I'm going to take it away when we can. But I wouldn't undo all the stuff that's happened, because this is part of our family's journey, and it's part of parenthood for us. Every single person in this room is part of our story, and I don't want to undo all of you.
Absolutely not. And, we all know we're all family here, and the reality is everyone in this room is here, and we are the volunteers. We're the ones that are here. We're doing a lot of the work, but one of the reasons we're here is because we all have questions, whether it be what's the new triple or whatever it is. So we all have questions, and that's the thing that we are going to get the opportunity to do now. So at home, here in the room, now is the time to start submitting those questions, the things that you want to hear from, because we're going to bring up a few people that I should have all the answers. So start submitting those questions. But at this point, I do want to bring up our panel. Today we've got some amazing people here to talk and answer questions. We're going to have some discussion prior to that, but as Pam mentioned, we'll get as many questions answered as we can. But I do want to bring up Mary Dwight, the policy Senior Vice President of Policy for the CF Foundation. I also want to bring up Drucy Borowitz, our VP of Community Partnership. And last but definitely not least, Bruce Marshall, our Senior Vice President of Political Affairs. Let's welcome him up.
Pressure, all the answers, huh?
All
yeah. That's why you're here, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
So we're really excited to ask you guys these questions today, and I'm really excited to have you all on the panel. And I think one thing that I wanted to ask you, Mary, let's start with you, is, we're obviously really involved in advocacy, and we know we're asked as a community to do a lot of different things in the advocacy space. But how does your team land on those policy priorities?
Okay. Thank you. I love this question, and I'm super excited to be able to talk to this. The fundamental answer to that is that the policy agenda of the foundation drives from the mission, right? What is best for people with cystic fibrosis is what's going to anchor anything we do in a public policy space. And so fundamentally, there are two core components of that. How do we go as fast as possible on drug discovery and research and development? How do we make sure that we are able to be at the cutting edge of innovation and balancing safety and efficacy, making sure, especially as we think about treatments that somebody's going to do for a lifetime, that those two things are in balance. And then on the other side, none of that works if everyone doesn't have access to it. And so that's really the other core component of the foundation's policy agendas, is ensuring access to the high quality specialized care that you guys talked about, that I know we're probably going to hear about from Bruce, that make sure that it's adequate, that it's available for everyone, no matter who you are, and that it's affordable. So those are sort of the core components. How do we figure that out? Again, it really drives from what's best for people with cystic fibrosis. When we look at, there are myriad issues that sort of fall into those categories. And so we really take a deep dive to do a comprehensive analysis of what the issue is. There's a lot of things in Washington and state capitals that sound one way, but maybe another way. And so our job in the policy department is to really unpack that and make sure that we understand all the ramifications and how it might impact somebody with cystic fibrosis. And then to your question about, well, then what? It's sort of an art, not a science, and there's a lot of different components that go into influencing policy that the foundation has at their disposal, but really, I'm going to use Pam's term, it's really you all are the catalyst. And when we think about how to engage, thanks Pam, when we think about how to engage and really make an issue stand out and make sure that people who were asking for help and asking to make changes or not make changes, that they really understand and are anchored with the personal story. And really that's what drives our asks to you all. Help us unpack this. Help us illustrate this from the perspective of somebody living with cystic fibrosis, somebody living with a chronic illness, somebody who needs a new therapy. How do we tell that story? And it really is the bedrock of enabling us to go forward. So it's really that story is how, and you guys have done that so amazingly in a variety of settings, telling that story, no matter what our next ask is that we're coming through the door, really anchors the reason why you're there and why we're doing that. So I'm going to put in a plug. There's going to be an advocacy session at the next breakouts. So if you're intrigued and interested in knowing what more about it, I hope you guys can join that section.
Thank you. That was really helpful to hear. Thank you. I have a question for you, Bruce. So I know how critical care team engagement is and how important it is that we have these relationships at our care center. And I also know how magical it is every time I hear that cystic fibrosis is the best story in medicine. That phrase really resonates with me. And I think a lot of people here and watching online, when you're recruiting new clinicians for cystic fibrosis, does that resonate with them? And what things are you thinking about when you are looking to recruit?
Yeah, absolutely, Jackie. Having the best story in medicine is a great recruitment tool. People love joining a winning team. And there are two things to think about when we think about with recruitment. One is, what do we need today, and what are we going to need in the future? What do we need tomorrow? It's sort of like the Gretzky quote, skate to where the puck is. So we always sort of keep in mind the current needs and the future needs. And then it's not just about recruitment. Once we recruit new talent, we want to figure out how do we retain them in the CF community. So before I go a little bit deeper on recruitment, I want to follow up on something, Jackie, I think you mentioned accreditation. And some of you may not know what this is all about. It goes back to the roots of the organization. The leaders there laid out the accreditation criteria, and that included multidisciplinary care that was comprehensive and coordinated. And this accreditation process, one of the main areas of focus is to make sure the care teams, by virtue of site visits, peers that go and spend a day and a half at these teams, and hold the institutions accountable to provide the support and the multidisciplinary teams to meet those accreditation criteria. Now, we provide care centers with a grant as well, and we provide flexibility with those dollars that they can plug the gaps on that team. But in terms of just retaining the people that we need, that accreditation process is really important. Now let me talk a little bit about recruitment. We've been working hard on recruitment over the last number of years in a few different areas. One area is adult care docs. We knew the wave was coming, moving over to the adult care side, and now through PACE Awards, we've recruited about 100 new adult care docs with a retention rate of over 70%, and we're still working hard on that program. More recently, we've been recruiting gastroenterologists, endocrinologists, pharmacists, physical therapists, mental health coordinators. And as I mentioned, once we have this talent in place, we work on keeping them in the community. We strongly encourage them to go to the North American CF Conference. That's where the Kool-Aid is. We really bring them into the community. We connect them with their peers. We have networking sessions to bring them into the community. We have a mentoring program, so the new recruits, we connect them with an experienced mentor in their same discipline. And again, there's a sharing of knowledge, but there's also a relationship building that I think is really important in retaining this new talent. And then the final hook, and this may surprise some of you, the relationships that healthcare professionals develop with patients and families is really important for retention. And I'll just give you my personal experience. I joined the CF community in the late 80s, and I was drawn because of the scientific advances. The gene had just been discovered, and the registry data. I'm a nerd. I love the data. But that's not what kept me in the community. It was really the relationships and the partnerships that we developed with the adults with CF that we took care of at the University of Utah. And it's really those memories of those people that in large part are a driver. They're still a driver for me. I remember those folks. So those relationships are not only important for retention, but I really believe they help cut down on burnout. There's this burnout phenomenon in healthcare professionals. We don't see it quite as much in the CF community. I think it's really important there.
I agree with that, because I notice you talk about the physician burnout that can happen, and certainly it trickles down all through, the physician to the parent. The physician's telling us, you just have to do these 7 treatments every single day and take these medicines, and then we're just asking our kids to do the same, and it creates burnout for us all the way down to our children that they're going to take into adulthood if we don't help give that relationship support.
Yeah, and speaking of burnout, I want to touch on, I know you mentioned mental health as well. I mean, how are we making sure that mental health is a part of every single care visit, and not just it's an actual conversation and not just a questionnaire or a box check? How are we making this a real thing?
That's a very important point, Drew. That's exactly where we want to go. We want to normalize the conversations, and this is just a part of care. But let me take a step back and provide a little context. We supported a study that was an international study called the TIDE study, and that showed the prevalence of anxiety and depression among people with CF was 2 to 3 times that of the general population, and also in parents as well. That study encompassed parents. Again, a much higher prevalence of anxiety and depression. And no surprise, we know that CF impacts the entire family, not just the individual with CF, the parents, the siblings, the grandparents, the extended family. A diagnosis of CF, as you've heard, sends a shockwave through the family. The other thing is, it's back to this point of normalizing the conversation. It's from the World Health Organization, a sentence that I really like. There is no health without mental health. CF care is about more than genotype. It's about more than FEV1. It's about more than BMI. It really has to be holistic care that encompasses mental health. And as we just again to provide some context, we started working on this a number of years ago. After that TIDE study, we came together with our European colleagues to develop clinical practice guidelines, and that was about a year or so process. And as we were moving through that process, we scratched our heads and said to ourselves, are the care centers going to be ready for this? And so we did a survey of our care centers, and sure enough, we found that they didn't have the expertise or the resources to actually implement these guidelines that we were going to publish. So we formed a task force and then a mental health advisory committee, and we listened to their recommendations about trying to integrate mental health into the frontline CF care. And we've invested millions of dollars getting mental health coordinators into about 140 CF programs at this point. And we're really all in on this, on mental health. We think this is really important. And back really to your question, Drew, this is much more than screening. This is prevention and diagnosis and treatment and follow through. So a few more comments about mental health and this idea of normalizing the conversation. Mental health is still stigmatized in society. And we want to eliminate that in the CF community. We want this just to be a normal part of care. You get a breathing test, you get asked about your emotional and emotional and mental health. We really want to normalize these conversations. We don't want people to keep this to themselves. We don't want people to suffer in silence. There are treatments for these conditions. We want it out in the open. And then the care team work in partnership with the families to really address these issues.
Absolutely, and obviously family dynamics play a huge part of this, but also, we talk about this at the care center level, but, we also know that our care center really extends outside of just that to really our families, our friends, our colleagues and coworkers. And so Drucy, tell me, what's next with CF Peer Connect? It's really kind of our newest program, so to speak, that's really reaching out. Given the isolation from other patients and each other and families, how are we working to deepen the opportunities for them to really become engaged with each other?
So for people who don't know what CF Peer Connect is, as you do, it's our one-to-one peer mentoring program. So people like Drew and others who volunteer to do so get some training so that they can be available to other people who are looking for someone to just share those challenges. Jackie, I love the way you said it. Some days are tough and some days are not, but that kind of up and down, that experience, that lived experience is something that only somebody who's living with CF can understand. So since we last met at VLC, we've expanded CF Peer Connect from a program that was just connecting adults with CF with each other to expanding it to family members as well. And we have people in the program between the ages of 16 and up to their 60s and 70s. And Drew, I really want to thank you specifically for being available for men. And I think echoing what Bruce said, men have a harder time in this society saying, I really would like to talk to someone else who's had an experience or been through something that I'm going through right now. And so I urge all of you, those of you online, those of you in the room, to consider seeking that out. And the kinds of questions that people come to ask of others are just life experiences. We started with adults with CF, and so the two most common requests are to talk to somebody about dating, and the other is having to do with things related to work. Choosing work, being in that work environment, maybe retiring from work if you feel that you need to for health reasons. As we've expanded to families, there are other questions, and this issue of care for the caregiver. How do you find that space for yourself? Because it is a challenge, and someone else who's lived with CF really understands that, and we often hear, it was so great to speak to somebody who gets it, who just gets it. We also have people who are newly diagnosed who'd like to talk to someone, and on the family side, that could be a young child who's been newly diagnosed. We get a lot of requests on the adult side to talk to somebody who's been diagnosed as an adult, because it is a different kind of experience. We've expanded some other areas. We thought to ourselves, should we include bereavement as a topic? And we have included that this year as well. Interestingly, we hear people asking to talk about aging with CF. And, that's one of these high-class problems, but things sometimes follow the natural order of life. And people with CF are aging and want to talk to somebody else who's in that leading edge. People who are considering transplant, a variety of different experiences, not from the medical standpoint, but from that lived experience standpoint. And so if there are people who either would like to be trained to share their life experiences or who would like to be able to talk to somebody else, you can go to cff.org on the Get Involved page, and that's how people get involved in CF Peer Connect.
Absolutely. And I would just echo that for anyone who's thought about it, I'd highly encourage it, whether it be you want to talk to somebody or you'd like to be someone who helps other people. The training is very, very simple. It's some online modules. You're not a licensed therapist. You're just there to share your experience and communicate. So whether you're here in the room or you're out there watching online, I'd really encourage you, if it's something that speaks to you at all, look into it, learn more about it, and I know that we would love to have more and more people involved.
Yeah, it seems like there's, with all the different virtual connections we have within the foundation, and that you can, take out into your own world, whether it's, social media or finding someone through your chapter, it seems like there's always someone you can find that's been there. And I think that's really meaningful for us. I have another question for you. Okay. I keep going back to you. So as we have so many drugs that are coming down the pipeline, when we're at things like March on the Hill and in district meetings, we're talking about all these great medications coming our way. And how are you partnering with insurance companies to prepare them so they're educated when these claims start to come across their desk after approval?
Great question again. It's really important that we have that conversation with the entire system, who we all have to interact with cystic fibrosis. And we know that it's a heavy burden for the community. We know that both people with CF and families and also care teams spend an inordinate amount of time navigating the health insurance system. It's also complex and often extremely frustrating. So we know it's out there. I think we think about it in sort of a three-pronged system. One, the system itself. And it's really important that the system work for somebody with cystic fibrosis. And that's why the policy pieces are so critical, right? We need a system that supports this highly complex disease and all the care that's required for it. So those principles that I mentioned earlier really are fundamental. And a lot of our work is around creating and improving a system for people with cystic fibrosis. But then we also know cystic fibrosis is still a rare disease, and there are an awful lot of people in the healthcare system who do not know very much about it, and that includes the payers out there. It is sort of the nature of the beast, right? They are going to have far fewer people with cystic fibrosis in their networks than cancer or diabetes or heart disease. And this is where our role really comes driving forward. Our role, again, is to tell that story and to help unpack and educate about cystic fibrosis. I think of it really in a way that we are playing the role of a medical specialty society combined with a patient advocacy network that helps explain what we know is best care for cystic fibrosis and how to get in there. So you can do that, and we do that in a variety of ways. One, to help navigate the system better. And COMPASS is a really fundamental core of that work. If you don't know about COMPASS, it's the Foundation's Patient Assistance Program, where we have a team of people, you already heard earlier today about Aaron Stocks and so many others, who really work one-on-one with individuals with cystic fibrosis, with family members and care teams to help navigate. And I know you guys have done that too.
Yeah, we realized 17 months too late that it's always okay to call COMPASS. You're never too far in. Mm-hmm. Major has had his G-tube for 18 months, and it took us 17 months to get Relizorb approved, which is a drug that is a cartridge full of enzymes so that he can get them overnight while he's getting his Pediasure. And I'm a project manager, and so I've got it. I don't need help. I know how to manage it. And I really could have called COMPASS probably about 3 months in when I started having trouble, but I kept going. I felt like I was in too deep, and how could I explain to everybody, to one person, all the different moving pieces? And more months passed by, and I was in deeper. And looking back on it, that's one thing I would have changed. We're lucky to have that drug approved now, and Major's getting it and doing great on it, but I could have saved myself. Maybe it still would have taken that time, but I didn't have to do all that work.
Yeah.
I could have had help.
So it's never too late to call COMPASS, and that's really the first prong of interfacing with payers. So please make sure you have that number out there, and it's something you can share with people you might hear who are having problems. The other role, again, I want to double down on the notion of this foundation's role as a hybrid of a patient advocacy organization and a medical specialty society. And really that's where we are interfacing with many, not all. I want to be clear, there are thousands of payers out there, but many of the largest payers who have the largest number of people with cystic fibrosis. And primarily that looks like state Medicaids who are setting policy priorities and coverage, making coverage decisions about cystic fibrosis. So our job is to get evidence in front of them. The registry, which is really the bedrock of engagement as a community, is an amazing tool for us, as is all the things that we do to demonstrate evidence around the efficacy and the decisions around CF clinical care, that we can put those in front of payers and say, this is what we know and why we know it to be the best case of specialty care for cystic fibrosis today, and why we recommend that this is the kind of care that somebody should have, or this is the treatment that somebody should have. We have those conversations with payers to explain the uniqueness of cystic fibrosis, because remember, they might not have seen it. And so our job is to help unpack that. And this is a place where partnerships come driving through. And what we've seen here in highly effective partnerships is really connecting cystic fibrosis clinicians with payer clinicians who are making decisions. And let me give you an example of where I think it works best. In the state of Michigan, we have now formed a relationship with decision makers in Michigan Medicaid such that they now call our clinician leaders in the state when they are considering a change to cystic fibrosis coverage or new treatments are coming on. And they say, what do we need to know? How should we think about this? They're asking the experts, which is exactly the kind of thing we want to have happen. And the good news is we have more of those stories. It's not just Michigan, but that's really what we're driving towards. And to be able to facilitate those conversations is really important. I want to flag that we are well aware that a new thing is coming, we hope and expect, and the triple combination is going to really be a brand new sea change for many payers as well as the CF community. And right now, our hope is that everyone will have access to these therapies as quickly as possible, but we really see it as part of our charge to double down on these conversations in advance of the triples, to make sure that the payers out there understand why we're excited and what this means for CF. So I want to be clear that there may be bumps in the road, but we really think that it's the foundation's charge to be able to tell that comprehensive story of cystic fibrosis and how each of these new developments fits into it.
Awesome. I do want to go back to Drucy for one more here. So obviously this is about all the people, this is about everyone at home, this is about the community and the engagement. So what is the foundation, how are they reaching and helping those people that don't live in the same cities or near their care centers or even their chapters? Because a lot of us here live in or near those same cities, but there's also a lot of people that are out on the outskirts. How are we engaging those people that aren't immediately accessible?
That's a great question, Drew. And by the way, my name is Drucy, and your name is Drew. And I do answer to Drew. It's so odd for me to be on a panel with somebody who has a similar name to me. Yay for Drews. Well, the first thing is technology is in a different place. And, we have a variety of ways that we can engage people and not have them at infection risk, but also overcome geographic distances and just time and logistics for people. So I'd say one of the first and easiest ways, it's sort of the great strides of volunteer engagement, is community voice. And that is a way for people to be involved with the foundation, share their experiences and their perspective to help us know what's important to the community. It can range from the simplest things of, filling out a 5-minute questionnaire or just saying, nope, my life is too busy right now. I can't do any of the things you're asking. Or maybe use it as a conduit to a deeper involvement, such as being on a focus group or maybe even being on a committee. One of the other really powerful ways that we have is to listen to the community and not come up with the ideas ourselves, but let people who are living with CF tell us what are those ways they'd want to connect. We have grants that go out to the community, and many of the powerful things that we've heard are not ideas that we would come up with ourselves. For example, Project CF Spouse has connected more than 350 spouses of people with CF, a fantastic thing that we never would have thought about before. SingSpire is another impact grant that is online singing lessons for people with CF. There are a variety of them. You heard about life coaching before with Bobby Foster. And so having that ability to have a mechanism for people with ideas for connection through the community is fantastic. And then, of course, we have virtual events. And thank you for being on a panel for one of what we called CF MiniCon, which was about self-care and relationships. And those virtual events are moments where people in the community come together, began with a focus on adults, and our signature event, BreatheCon, which happens every fall, is still an adults-only event. But we've expanded our virtual events as well, and so FamilyCon is coming up on June 9th, and you can register on cff.org on the Get Involved spot, and registration usually opens about a month ahead of time. But it is an opportunity for people to come together in a large way and connect in that sort of cyberspace environment, but with a real feel to it. And then, Jaci, you mentioned before that afterwards people form relationships and they can continue on with social media. We spend time making sure we create a positive environment in these virtual events. And I know that's one of the things that you do in your Instagram account. And I was going to ask you to say something, and then Mary can talk a little bit about how we've used social media to connect people at a distance and be involved in all the wonderful things the foundation does. So.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to. I started an Instagram page about, 3-4 years ago, and initially it was just for fun and sharing about I love to exercise and, want to share a major story. Thought I might use it for fundraising. I didn't really know, and it's just become so much more. I've met so many moms and dads and people with CF that so many are here in this room that I'm running around hugging because we're buddies and we talk on Instagram every couple of days. And I think you guys do such a good job of giving us the start of where the connection can form. I've met some of these people on, say FamilyCon that Drew was on, and then we started following each other on Instagram, and then we can keep the conversation going. It just takes, I think, one thing sometimes to click that the foundation offers that can hook somebody, and then we can go and run with our own relationship.
Yeah, that power of connection and feeling that you belong to something bigger than yourself is so positive.
And often beneficial to the effort that we're pushing forward. So just a little anecdote, March on the Hill is one of the Foundation's flagship advocacy events at the US Capitol, where we bring people from around the country to advocate for cystic fibrosis. Just a couple weeks ago we did this. But we were able to really magnify our presence up on Capitol Hill and in Washington, D.C. through an online day of action, which, little side trick, it was a week. But which is good, and we were able to really demonstrate that to offices. I think we sent almost 5,000 messages that week to Capitol Hill about cystic fibrosis and the ask that we were putting forward from people all around the country. It was so important because we were able to show to those offices, hey, it wasn't just the Strubes who were here from Iowa, but many, many other people in Iowa care about the things they just came to talk to you about too. So technology really lets us connect with each other, but also push out to the world beyond the CF family.
And just kind of bringing it back, and so technology can help us overcome geographic boundaries, life logistics and time, and keep people safe in terms of infection risk. So. Absolutely. Thanks for asking the question.
Absolutely. And I know we want to get to some questions here. We've got a few that have come through. So continue to submit those. We will make sure that we get through as many of these as we can in the 20 or so minutes that we have left.
Well, I'll jump right in. So back to you, Mary, with the first question. With the newly refreshed battle on healthcare that's going on, what can we do to really share the impact of these potential changes to our community, and how can we help mitigate our feelings of being scared as parents and people with CF that are impacted? How can we work with that fear that we have?
It has certainly been a roller coaster in healthcare policy in the last couple of years. This week was no exception, with several court cases coming down and also new decisions out of the Trump administration on what action to take. So that feeling is understandable. And I think the best thing that we can do is continue to do what we have done so well over the last few years as a community, which is share why we're concerned and what matters to us. We're actually going to be sending out, I think, on Monday, a new alert to say it's time again to tell your story, to contact your elected officials and tell them what matters to you as somebody with cystic fibrosis or somebody who cares about somebody with cystic fibrosis and what you need in the healthcare system. The best way, the most immediate thing you can do, I'm going to get it, I'm a terrible person because I never remember the number. You can text right now, get out your phone. I don't see phones out. This is when you're allowed to get out your phone. And you need to text FIGHT CF, all in caps, to 52886. And that is the best way to stay in touch, to know when to take action. And of course, you can always take action when we don't tell you to, and you can keep telling your story. But that's a way to know this is a moment, right? This is a time to engage, to tell your story.
Awesome. So Bruce, I'm going to kind of combine a couple on here. The first one says, you were talking about the importance of mental health. How is the foundation helping our centers meet the financial needs of clinics to keep the mental health worker? And then also, how can someone get access to the registry or get more info? Is it online?
Yeah, with mental health, as I mentioned, we're funding these mental health coordinators, and they're what we call catalyst grants. The idea is to sort of get the ball rolling and get it on the radar screen at the institution, get the program developed. And what we expect those institutions to do is to sustain it beyond. That's been an issue at some of the institutions with mental health coordinators. We've had to step back in and provide some bridge funding. So we're working with the Mental Health Advisory Committee to try to figure out what's the best path forward. Maybe it's a bolus of resources at the beginning and then a taper over time so that we can retain these people, because the stories that we hear back and what we see in the annual progress reports is they're really making a difference. And then I think there was another question.
Is there a way that people can access the registry, just the lay people, that we can see the information, our own personal information, and any other data?
Yeah, absolutely. All of our annual registry reports are on our website. There's a highlights report. There's a very detailed 80-page report. And now we also produce patient summary reports that go back to the care centers. At this point, there's not a mechanism for patients and families to directly access them, but a number of care centers are printing them out, going over the graphical displays, and this has been very helpful. We've gotten very positive feedback about that.
So if someone wanted to see their personal report, could they request that to view that with the care center?
Request it from their care team.
Okay.
Good to know. So this question is really for all or any of you regarding the movie 5 Feet Apart. Not commenting on, or not really asking about the accuracy of it, but when it comes to the awareness it's bringing, what's your thought on what that's doing for the community from an awareness perspective?
Well, I will say that it's a movie, and so it's there to entertain. Everyone's path with this disease is different, and so it picks one particular slice of life with CF. But I think one thing it has done is it has raised awareness of cystic fibrosis to people who had never heard about this disease before. And I think for people in the CF community, it does bring up some very powerful themes, and some of which really resonate. We do have some resources that are available on cff.org, for example, for families who want to talk with their teens about the movie. And I think for our community, even something that is fictionalized but yet has such a broad reach is a positive thing.
Any other insights on that?
Pardon me?
Any other insights from?
Yeah.
No, I think Drucy covered it well.
Awesome. I know there is a quick, I know, Drucy, you did mention this before, but how can someone get involved with CF Peer Connect? What's the easiest way for them?
Go to cff.org. on the Get Involved tab. And really that's the way, if there are any of the things that I've mentioned that people want to get involved with, that you can have more information. That's the place to sign up for Community Voice. Again, sort of an entry-level way of getting involved in this larger community in a different way than the kinds of events that go on at chapters. And I don't want to discourage people from doing that either, because those are fantastic events that really give people a sense of belonging as well. But CFF.org, Get Involved, is where you can find CF Peer Connect, our virtual events, and also a way to sign up for Community Voice, see about impact grants, although what day is it today?
Friday.
The application process closes, I think, tomorrow. Today, tomorrow. So
Get them in.
yeah.
I'm asking this wonderful question that I think everyone is dying to know. Where did Drew get his socks? Where?
Airport, actually, in Denver. I am wearing socks. There are socks there.
But Drew, no socks today, but Drew does always have some pretty cool socks on. Just maybe tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow.
Show them the inside. So.
What's that?
Yeah, we want to see.
I'm not
We want you to
showing
show
my suit right now. No one cares about my suit. We have like 1 minute left, so we got one more question.
So how can volunteers help with retention for care teams? You kind of touched on what you're doing, but how can volunteers help? Because we really, as parents, rely on these relationships. So what can we do?
Well, I come back to something, Jackie, I think you mentioned, the Patient Family Advisory Board, where you sort of get beyond just your personal and family relationship with the care team. You connect with them, and hopefully you had to look behind the veil to see really what are the larger issues that they're dealing with. And if they're short of staff or whatever the issue is, sometimes patients and families can really have an impact there. So I'm curious, that your comment piqued my interest. Did you want to say anything about what your relationship was like, and was that a useful experience for you to participate in something like that?
It was especially useful for me as a new mom. I think I got involved with it. I helped start it actually, and Major was under the age of 1. So it was a great way to get plugged in right away with the care center. And even though I don't serve on that board anymore, I already have the connections, and I know who to talk to. I feel really engaged with our clinic, and it helped me feel like I was doing something to keep our care center so great. I'm super proud of our care center, and that makes me feel invested in it, that I get to help keep it that way. Definitely.
It does come down to that partnership theme, right? The ultimate outcomes are, it's not just the clinician, it's not just a healthcare team, it's the joint working together. So the engagement on the clinical side is really important.
Stronger together.
Stronger together.
Stronger together, absolutely. So that actually wraps up what we have time for. I do have an announcement here. When you are signing up for action alerts, reminder that when you text Fight CF, it needs to be 1 word, not 2 words. If you texted it in 2 words, that will not get you signed up for the action alert. So make sure it is 1 word, Fight CF, all caps. With that, I want to thank all of our panelists for being here and answering all of our questions. Give them a huge round of applause.